Hello guys, welcome back. In this lecture, we're going to extend the first lecture which was talked about the web apps introduction. Now we will extend on top of that basics. So we talked about in the previous lecture about the app service plan and web application. Now let's try to understand what are the hierarchy, a complete design with the hierarchy, what are the resources are involved. Let's try to understand that. The first thing is definitely you need to know place into a resource group. So your web applications definitely go into a resource group which will bound with a specific region, and there is a limitation of that resource group because we are talking about a region. So within that specific region, let's say you are created maybe in East US, within that East US region you cannot have a mix of Windows and Linux with the same app service plan. So as the next layer of hierarchy would be definitely the app service plan. So you have to create your app service plan. So that plan you have to define whether you're going to work on Linux or Windows. So that's the operating system or the stack that you have to define. So once you define that, you cannot mix within this region by creating one more app service plan or one more plan. Let's say you created a resource group called testing demo, and you also created that resource group in a East US region, and now you are trying to create a service plan for your Windows base as the stack. And if you wanted to create one more with a Linux, it's not possible. So you have to go for another resource group, and then within that region you can create. So within the single resource group or within that RG, you cannot have more plans with the same mix and match. So you can't do that. So you have to go for another life cycle of resource. We talked about the app service plan. Within this app service plan, whatever the virtual machines you are going to create, so we will have in the backend as the virtual machines, right? Let's say you are taking higher performance of app service plan. That means there's a backend of virtual machines, so that we called as a worker VMs, or we call sometimes worker nodes also. So let's say you created a app called web app 1, you might also create a web app 2, but these two are part of one service plan. What does it means is within this service plan you can have multiple web applications, and these web applications will use the same capacity, same capabilities of your application service plan. Let's say app service plan, maybe you have earlier we talked about within this lecture about different plans like maybe a production or dev or isolated. Within this maybe you are using S1. So with the S1 you have this memory of 1.75 gigahertz memory and A series computing or equivalent. So all that power you're gonna get it within this applications. So these two applications can use that kind of powerful app servicing. So as a first step, you create a resource group, and also you need to have a service plan. Remember, we talked about app service plan is nothing but all the applications or web applications that you create or app services should be a part of your app service plan. So that's the key. So I hope that's useful for you to understand about it. Let's jump into the demonstration on how to create. So within this demo, as a first step, I will create a resource group, and then I can create a app service plan. Let's say if I don't want to create app service plan as a first, while I create this application, web application, it will also ask me to create the web app specific app service plan. So either way, I must have to have app service plan. So instead of you create a web application while wizard you to create an app service plan, I can go ahead and create directly app service plan as a first step. Then I can introduce my applications within that app service plan. That's how I'm gonna plan. So let's jump into the Azure portal. Within this Azure portal, you can search for app service plan. So you would be getting as the application service plan. So that's nothing but the app service plan. You can click on that. This is where you can actually create your app service plan. So click on add. That would take to the next blade. And within this wizard, I need to first step as to create my resource group. So I'm just clicking a resource group to be created, like web apps demo example. And then I'm going to choose here app service plan. As we talked earlier, you need to actually look at what kind of operating system you're going to choose. Let's say if you're sticking for Linux, so the entire solution is going to host on a Linux based, and based on this, the web applications will define a different language support. Let's say if you're using Windows .NET Core, Windows .NET, then definitely Linux is not supported. But whereas the .NET Core, then Linux and Windows both are supported, because the .NET Core is compatible both the operating systems. So now let me give here some kind of a name. In this case, I can give my app service 1 plan maybe. And my solution is actually works on a Windows, so I'll choose as a Windows, and with my region as Central US. And this is where the pricing tier as well as the specs that you can actually choose for your app service plan. So in this case, I can choose the SKU size as the S1 if I really want it. But you see here, the total is CPUs are 100 and 1.75 GB of memory that I can allocate for this app service plan. But if I just change this, I get actually specs picker, which will help me to determine what kind of specs is really better for my solution. So the starting with the dev solution, where you have the F1 and a little bit higher if you go to B1 with more custom SSL and domain, and also up to 3 instances that you can scale up manually. All that options you have with the dev. But just to identify in an easy way, this spec picker will help you out a lot. So if your solution is currently in a development and testing, then one of these possible one might be useful for you, anyway from F1 to B3. And similarly, if your solution is coming in the production, you will start with S1 to anywhere between P3 V3 solution, or even further level of S2 S3 or P1 P2 P3. And this is where the solution would come into the picture. And as you increase the performance for your ties, the pricing gets changed. At the same time, it is also changes the memory and other size of the VM, which is in the backend as a worker VM or worker node we call. That level will increase. Also you have the isolated. Again, within the isolated, you can go for a different environments where it's fully isolated. And if you see inline creation of app service environment is currently not supported here, but that's fine, isolated. But in normal, in other regions, it's going to support it. So in my case, I'm going to choose here S1, which is a basic one in my case for the production, which is going to charge me per month. It's going to be close to $60 to $70. That's what it is showing in my local currency. So I'll choose that and click on review and create. So this is going to create my app service plan. So this is where your future applications can be part of this service plan. So I'll just click on create. That's going to create a small application service plan. Within this, now you can create additional applications. So the applications can be created, and these applications will be part of your app service plan. Now the app service plan has created, and let's go to this and have a look on it, how this looks like. So if you have created any of the applications, it will be listed here under apps. Since currently there's no apps are associated here with this service plan, nothing is listed here. Otherwise you would be actually getting all the applications listed here. And next thing would be the file system or storage. That talks about utilization of your current threshold of your physical size of that service. So in our case, we didn't use anything, so it's actually showing. So this plan again with respect to the S1 service plan, so you just have to look at with the respected S1 plan, what is the sizes available, and that's a size whether we really used it or not. And coming back to the networking, this is where you can actually go for hybrid connections, and you can also securely access your virtual machines by managing or by connecting your virtual networks VNets also. And the scaling up, scaling down is nothing but the auto scale specific specific of this service where you can actually scale up, scale down based on your service plan that you have. Currently we are at S1, so S1 talks about anything about 10 instances that can be scaled. Also it talks about the 50 GB of the disk space, and a daily of 10 times the backup can be scheduled. So if you are planning to change anything from one service plan to another service plan in future, let's say your web applications are not performing well and you think that you need to give them more computing power or you need to give more memory, then you might be choosing to change from anywhere, any different service plans that are available within these. So you can choose those service plans and it can be applied. So let's say if I choose here 400 A CPUs, and it's a great performance like 7 GB, and it's going to cost a lot, but you get more powerful computing power also. So you can change it by clicking and applying. If you are you wanted to scale down that, you can always go, for example, currently my plan is S1. If I wanted to change to maybe a basic one into a development, I can do that service plan changing. So all that is possible, like scale up and scale down of your app service plans can be performed from here. And with respect to the scale out plans, you can choose either your scaling should happen manually or automatic. Let's say if you are looking for auto scale your applications, if the CPU percentage is utilizing so and so percentage, very similar configuration that we have done for the virtual machine scaling, you can add those rules and you can configure and you can actually schedule based on that. Let's see, the average of my CPU is going to maybe a 70 percentage, let's say, or here I can give, and then it can actually scale up by instance 1, and that way you can validate those specific configurations if at all I wanted to configure auto scale. So this auto scale is quite similar, there's no change. If you just look at the high availability performancing purpose for virtual machines, the same scaling parameters that you have here, but this is applicable for web applications. Let's say in my case I just wanted to go for manual scaling. So what happens is if I start increasing, if you see here this is one instance, what does it mean is in the backend for this app service plan it has created one A1 size of computing instance. Let's say if I increase here to 5, it's gonna create in the backend 5 instances. So I'm getting more performance, and the web applications that are gonna host will be used on more, maybe on a 4 or 5 different instances. It's gonna work. So that would be a huge actually, and that gives the higher performance for us. And I can go for the manual scaling at this point of time with the 1 count. And these are the basic settings that we can talk about the app service plan at this point of time. And if you look at for the monitoring, you do have the monitoring and alerts and log analytics services can be connected. All that are possible, very similar with any other Azure services or Azure resources that you have the monitoring. Similar thing, you can get it create, and you can work with those alerts and metrics, how this specific app service plan is actually performing. That being said, let's jump into creation of a sample web app and then try to associate that web app with this app service plan. So to create that, you can simply go here and click on app services and add a service. If you're trying to create directly from here, just search for the web app, and that would actually go for the creation of app services here. And you can choose your resource group and give the application or the instance name. That's going to be a name, that's where you're going to browse your application. So in my case, if I give here as Paddy, if this is not unique, it says that it's not available. But the application name that you're going to give must be a unique. Later point you can point this name to a custom domain name. So that's why it says that at this point of time paddy.azurewebsite.net is not available. Let's go ahead and add some other thing, so that might be available here, like paddymati.azurewebsite.net, which is available here. So in this case, As a next step, I should be show here the exact publish stack. So this is where I'm gonna use the code or Docker based container. Yes, web apps also now part of the Docker. So within these, web apps can be deployed inside your Docker container. So in our case, we are not using the Docker at this point of time. We are using a code base. That means my developers will develop the code, and the runtime of the stack has to be defined by your project or your developers. Let's say this is maybe running on a Java example, and that means the product is completely developed on this web application is based on the Java. So Java SE, and you can choose whether it's going to be Tomcat or backend of the web server stack that you can choose, and then you can find out here whether it's going to be hosted on Linux or Windows. Based on that, actually your app service plans will be visible. Let's see, as I said earlier, we cannot have within a single resource group two different type of app service plans. One can be on a Windows, other one cannot have on a Linux. So it should be stick to only one. So in our case, if I try to select Linux, it will not show you, as this plan is not available. So if I have to choose as a Windows, then my service plan will be visible here. So similar thing, but in this case it's not in Java. I wanted to go for different programming language, let's say on a .NET Core or ASP.NET, Java, PHP, Python, Ruby. All these are supported. Out of that, I'm going to use this time as the ASP.NET 3.5 application based, and here my app service plan that I have created, it is available. In case if I don't want to use this app service plan, all I have to do is I have to click on create new and give a name. Let's say I wanted to give this as demo 2 example service plan, just for demonstration for you, and click on OK. And now this has been created here, but I didn't choose here SKU type, so I can go ahead and look for my spec picker, which talks about very similar thing, like whether your solution is in a dev or production or should be an isolated. So if it is isolated, you can go ahead and choose whatever the solution or whatever it's going to cost you. For example, you want 7 GB of performance, then it's going to be highly isolated with up to 100 instances can be scaled up, and traffic manager can be used, and also the storage to be 1 TB. All that performance I can get it. So in my case, I'm going to use actually the old one which we created, in this case app service plan 1, and click on monitoring. So if you are trying to enable monitoring, again within the monitoring application insights, we are talking about application insights. We have a dedicated lecture on application insights. Just check out that within this course. And application insights will give you the in detail of what's happening, how the code is behaving, and where it is taking a lot of time, or bottleneck issues or performance issues, and how the users are actually able to integrate with your application, and that will actually send the telemetry data to application insights to give you more insights of your application and their bugs and their errors. All that you can get it with the application insights, and we have a dedicated lecture on that part, and you can check out that application insights within the monitoring section. So I'm not going to enable here application insight at this point of time, and just clicking on the tags. If you are interested, you can give the tags, and you look at here resource are a web, which is a default tag which is coming up, and review and create, and you can click on create. That's going to create a web application, and that web application is going to be pointed inside your service plan 1 app service plan. Now the application has deployed, so let's go to that application and have a look on it. So you have here the deployment slots, you have the deployment center, which talks about how do you deploy your application. Do you want to deploy your application from your OneDrive, or maybe from the Dropbox, or how you're going to deploy? And this will be useful for integration with your continuous deployment and continuous integration part. Like you can use a different type of third-party repos. For example, Azure is a built-in, and GitHub or local Gitbucket or OneDrive, which is again manual deployment method. These are push and sync based, where you can use OneDrive, Dropbox, external, which is again from the Git or other repos and FTP. All these are the possible options which are enabled for your continuous deployment and continuous integration, which will offer for your developers and next layer of DevOps integration. So this is where DevOps integration comes into the CI and CD, which is a continuous integration and continuous development with different repos. And also you have here settings, which we need to talk about it here. Before we talk on anything on the deployment center or settings, let's have a look on the application, how this looks like. So this is the application which was created. So any application that you create with your application name .azurewebsites.net will be available. So just click on that. It's going to open this application and it says that hey, this is a simple web application for your developers, and this is a simple code that was pushed by Microsoft for your application. If you see here, we didn't actually configure FTP settings yet for the user ID and the password, but we do have the FTP, how to access this. And if I just go a little bit down, I can have a look on my deployment settings. We talked about the deployment center. This is where we use a different type of source controlling, and then we use for the continuous development and integration for the building those application, and we configure that application. And now when we go for the configuration, we will actually configure here the application integration specific to your SQL database or whatever the database specific connections. You can use it here to connect so that your application can be easily connect with those databases and other applications. And here for the general, this is very important within this stack, what kind of stack you're going to use. So when we are creating this application, we actually looked at to select the stack as a .NET and with the version 3.5. Let's say if I want to change my mode to change to .NET 4.8, I can do that version upgrade directly from here, and the platform I can reconfigure to 64-bit if really I wanted. And the FTPs, whether you want to allow or disable FTP state, you can use that configuration. And also here the HTTP version, you want to configure 2.0 or 1.1. And coming back to the ARR, which is very important here, very similar to the FNAT cookies that we used with the NLB or load balancing services in the previous lectures. In the networking section we walked, if you are looking for FNAT configuration, then you can enable on. So this is very important because when you are scaling up here your instances, when you have more than 5 or 6, like more than one basically. So if a user connection is already established to your specific machine, and it's better to continue with that same session cookie based, otherwise they might session might get interrupted. So we use ARR by owning switching on, and also always on will prevent the applications that being idle timeout. That means that if your instances are not used anymore, then if you switch off, that means the version that instances can be go offline, so that the load will be higher on the actual web application, right? So think that, but this is very useful in terms of if you want to save the cost, you don't want your application worker nodes to be run, then you can choose as off. Otherwise you can switch it on state, so the virtual machines or the instances, or we call it as the worker nodes, will be in an on state. And these are the remote debugging and client certificate, all that the common settings that you have. And default documents, like very similar, the name of your starting application. Let's say you build your application, what is your starting home page, whether it is index.html or default.html or default.hdm. So that's what it talks about, the default documents. And you can also path map can be done here for your virtual application directories, and you can handle those mapping with a script processor, and all commands and extensions can be done here. So once you've done the changes, you can save it here. In my case, I'm not doing that. And the next thing would be the authentication and authorization. Let's say your application wants to allow the authentication of Azure AD, or maybe a Facebook or anonymous or maybe if Google or Twitter, all that are possible by integrating here with third-party authentication providers. So you need to just register your application with their client ID and app secret ID by going there. So you have to go to the their authentication providers. Let's say if it is Facebook, you have to go to the developers.facebook.com and then register your app ID and secret ID by giving your URL, so that can be used in terms of the REST API for allowing the authentication. And coming back to the application insights, we talked about the application insights earlier also. Now you have an option to turn on the application insights so that you know what code or what how basically this gives you an option for telemetry data. Specific information gives the insights of your application, at the same time insights of your end users, how they are behaving, all that information, so that you can act on it if there are any lagging of your application or problems or crashing. All that can be easily resolved to understand going for the debugging with the application insights. And yes, for the even the virtual machines or other applications that you have the identity management, very similar. You do have your system or user assigned identity management can be allowed for your web applications, and we have a detailed lecture on this which we talked about identity management advantages, where it just talks with that specific identities. For example, within those resources that can only talk with that specific given resources, in this case virtual machines or web applications. And talking about the backups, this is where you can take the backups, and you can configure the complete snapshots of your backups. And this all depends on the number of backups that you can take it in a day, and based on your app service plans. And you can map the custom domains. We'll come into that in a minute or so, but for now I'll just go to the Ssl settings. If you are trying to configure your Ssl settings, you can do it. You can upload your custom third-party certificates, or you can directly go ahead and buy from here, or you can apply your private key and public key set files, and then your website will run with that specific HTTPS certificate or SSL certificate. And also you can configure your networks in a hybrid mode, or you can integrate your web applications with your VNets. And as we talked earlier, this is again for the scaling. You can go ahead and configure scale up or scale down to configuring by manual or auto scale, so that specific instances based on the CPU and memory utilization, based on basically the number of metrics we'll talk about CPU or whatever it is, based on that it will spike up your resources. And coming back to the webhooks, web jobs are the jobs that needs to be executed in terms of running some kind of scripts or programs in the backend to process your context of your applications, can be configured from here. And pushes are a push kind of service that you want to enable to scale cross-platform mobile application pushing. Options can be done here by connecting to your notification hub. And MySQL, again, if you have the MySQL, you can actually connect your database connections by saving, and you can also import and export your apps so that database can be connected to MySQL databases. So those are the options that you have with settings inside your web applications. So now let's jump into a quick demo with the custom domain configuration. So as you know now, this web application able to browse with this specific URL. So this specific URL I'm able to browse with paddymighty.azurewebsite.net. So let's say my company has a different domain name that needs to be configured. In that situation, I can actually go ahead and configure my custom domains. So this is where I need to actually create some configuration, and also I need to create some kind of DNS records in my DNS server or my domain name provider within that location. So I'm going to create here, so here add custom domain. So I'm going to create here a domain name that I use for this demonstration purpose. So let's give here mssccguru.com, and you want to create this custom domain, or you can create a record or CNAME based on the sub. If it is a subdomain, you can also create a C record. So it's going to ask you to create these specific records just validate your ownership, and then this is a CNAME record that will actually point to a record of your msssguru.com as a custom domain. So let's jump into GoDaddy where I have this domain hosted, and I'm gonna add the record, a record, with respect to all these values within my GoDaddy. So that being said, let's open up my GoDaddy here. Within the DNS management of my GoDaddy, I can go ahead and add that specific records. So the first record would be a record by adding a value. So just click on add and choose a, and type of the host is @ and points to this IP address that was given by Azure. And also we need to create one more record, which is again text record in this case. So I'll just type text as a record, and you see here this is going to be the host of this value, and just enter the text value of this and then click on save. So just validate these two values with my Azure web app that is actually pointing. So I created these. So once I have done, actually I can go ahead and click on validate. If that's records are found, it's going to validate for us. So as you see here, this is actually added. So domain name also verified here, add custom domain. That's it. Click on that. It's gonna actually point to msssguru.com, and that's done. So it might take a minute or so, or sometimes it takes even 24 hours time, because the DNS replication should take over all this. So I'll just refresh here, and you see here add binding is not done SSL. So if I want, I can do that by binding configuration. Also if I have my certificate, I can upload to point to SSL, but I don't have this point of time the SSL certificate. So what I can do is I can simply open this domain name here instead of opening that. So I should be able to browse. Instead of this, I should be able to browse this, and I'm able to browse. But if you see here, it says that, hey, you don't have a valid certificate. That's being said, the reason being here SSL binding was not configured. If at all I have my SSL binding also, I should be able to work with that certificate. So that's how it's going to work, and I hope this entire lecture is useful, and we'll catch you in the next lecture. Thank you.